I'm Mary Clark. Today's Journey to the Boardroom session is about how to become a truly outstanding board member. As many presenters have explained, the board role is unlike most of what we've done before in business and sometimes even in life. It takes time to really get good at it. So there are two of us here presenting. For context, I've been on boards for about 40 years now. Today, I'm a director of two public companies, Ally Financial, which is the largest digital bank in the United States, and Deutsche Bank, where I'm on the board of the parent company in Germany. I'm also an independent director of a private software company called Allview Systems, which is owned by Vista Equity Partners in Austin, and I serve on two not-for-profit boards. I'm joined here by Carol Lamb.
Thank you, Mary. It's great to be here. Unlike Mary, I'm actually a lawyer, primarily a litigator, so board work was not really on my radar until fairly late in my career. My board service really began with nonprofit board work, and I most recently completed my term on the Stanford Board of Trustees, and I'm now on the Stanford Healthcare Board of Directors. I'm also an independent board member of a public pharmaceutical company located here in Southern California. The first time you enter a boardroom, there's an understandable tendency to think that everybody in the boardroom knows everything that's going on, that everybody but you is already operating at peak performance, and that the board is working well as a cohesive team. But Mary and I agree that that's virtually never the case. Individual board members, no matter what their level of experience, can always do a bit better, and boards can always improve as a team. Maybe.
So if you followed our videos, you've learned about fiduciary duties and the key responsibilities of any director. We've talked about how to get on a board and what to do in your first few meetings. Here we want to answer a deeper question. What does it take to continuously develop yourself so you can have an influence in the boardroom? The word influence is important because in order to have impact, it's necessary to have influence with the whole board as well as the executive team. The business of gaining and enhancing influence is not an easy task. To help us all get our arms around it, a small team of us, Linda Riefler, Carol, and I, worked together to develop a paper to lay out a framework for thinking about it. We call it the Personal Roadmap. It's part of our Leading Edge Stewardship series. You can find a link to the document either adjacent to the thumbnail that you use to get into this video or in the YouTube description. If you pull it out now, just pause and read it, you'll get more out of the video, or maybe just try having it handy while we talk. We're going to show you some pieces of it, but it'll be worthwhile to read the whole thing. And the other thing I should say is there's no way we could do justice to that all in this short conversation. So we do hope that you'll pick it up later and use it over time. So we're going to start with slide 1 here. The roadmap describes 7 kinds of board member behavior. They're down on the first column, going down on the left. And it puts them in a rubric to identify what good looks like across the entire spectrum of experience and competence. So the categories are individual purpose, learning mindset, skillful means. All 3 of these are things that you can have an individual impetus about. In other words, you can just take them on and work on your own. The next 4 really require that you be working together with your other board members. And this one includes trusted relationships, team play, engaging with the management team, and candid conversations. Board member develops mastery over time, of course. So our roadmap identifies examples of both effective and counterproductive behavior in the early days. It looks at what happens when the board member's behavior evolves over time. And finally, the behavior that the most experienced directors aspire to, because nobody gets it right every time. Here's a sample for the rubric for the first category, the personal roadmap. We're not going to try and read this or go through it line by line, but we want you to see what it looks like. So you can see it gives specific behaviors for the early days, for evolving, for aspirational, and the main takeaway, which Carol will describe. Again, we're going to leave it to you to go to the roadmap and read through these. Most of us find that we get something out of it every time we read it. And I mean, those of us who've written it get something out of it every time we read it. So I just can't urge you enough to keep this keep this by your side if you find it useful in the first round. So now, Carol, can you talk to us about that first category, purpose?
Sure, thanks, Mary. So when we talk about individual purpose with respect to one's board work, we're really talking about why a board member actually wants to serve on a board. The first question a board member should be asking herself falls into the know thyself category. There are certainly attractive aspects to serving on a board, particularly a public board. There's the money, financial compensation. There's the desirable work schedule, maybe a more flexible schedule. And there's also the stature and perhaps networking opportunities when one serves on a board. But the most important motivating factor should always be the desire to serve the organization and its mission. If your motivation for serving on a board is purely a self-interested one, the question is whether you'll be able to act in the best interests of the organization and not your own at all times. And while one of the goals of good board governance is to have the ability to work through difficult situations, a board member always has to be able to put aside her own self-interest and maintain some financial and psychological independence from the organization and its management. And so board members who are evolving in their roles increasingly recognize and are motivated by the fact that their board work, first and foremost, serves the organization and the greater good.
Our second topic is the learning mindset. The way we think about this is that leading edge stewards have a curiosity about the world, their organizations, and how to improve their own behavior. They exhibit the emotional maturity to listen and ask questions about the topic at hand. Over time, they develop the ability to help the whole board learning together. And they, as a consequence, they build influence across their own expertise in a broad variety of other topics. The result of this collective learning together, is that we reach authentic consensus. Super important in having a board work at its best.
So skillful means are the specific techniques that effective board members use to communicate, support, challenge, and persuade. Developing these skills are required to move from left to right in all of the categories you see on the chart: early, evolving, and aspirational. Effective directors are skilled at asking questions as opposed to offering opinions. If done humbly and earnestly, questions can prompt good discussion. A non-threatening question can shed light on hidden assumptions and encourage management or board members to come up with ideas that depart from the status quo. Very experienced directors usually have a knack for asking just the right question at just the right moment with just the right tone. Highly skilled directors think about how, or even if they will raise a topic. They're willing to edit or dismiss even their own ideas. They think about whether an issue should be raised in committee with the full board, or in executive session, or even in private. They think about whether the situation requires them to be patient or persistent, and they are always thinking about how they might have done something just a little bit better. All of the categories we've just discussed, a board member's purpose, a learning mindset, skillful means, are individual skills that can be practiced on your own. Now let's talk about the ones that are related to your fellow board members and the management team. Mayri is going to start us off talking about trusted relationships.
You know, this is a fundamental factor of all good working outcomes, trusted relationships. In the boardroom, they need to be built early and continuously. It starts in the interviewing process. And they need to be cultivated inside and outside the boardroom. That means getting together with individual directors when you first get on the board, so that you get to know everybody, and then staying in touch over time, bouncing ideas off each other, trying to always know where the other board members are on the broader range of topics that you're going to be discussing. One of the things we urge even our most experienced members to do is take a piece of paper out, write down every board member's name, and rank the quality of your relationship with that person. Then ask yourself, what could I do to increase, the rating on the page? Should I be reaching out more? Is there something I could do to support them in the boardroom? You want to give particular care to your relationships with the chair of the board and with your committee chairs. They're the ones who are going to have your back if you want to address a controversial issue. And if you know them well, you'll be able to talk with them well in advance and get a game plan going about how you're going to do it. It's also, of course, really important to develop a relationship with your fellow board member, the CEO. Now, that person's going to be really busy. Often they're working 24/7, traveling all over the world. Everybody wants to talk to them. And so at the beginning, I think you want to be super sensitive about that. You probably have most of your interactions in the boardroom at the beginning, and and then the breaks and things like that. Um, and to me, I always try to make sure they know I respect them before I try to act like someone who's in charge of them, if you will, and then let the relationship develop over time so that they actually want to hear from you. Yeah.
Let's talk about team play on a board. Here's something that I've seen happen in a boardroom. A board member makes a good point, perhaps a good suggestion, and when she's done talking, the room falls silent. And finally, the board chair says, "Okay, thank you," and then moves on to the next topic. And at the next break, several board members approach the board member who spoke up, and they say, "That was a really good point. I'm so glad you brought it up." Now, that's supportive, but what would have been even better is if they had been supportive in the boardroom and agreed with their colleague openly and not let her idea just die on the vine. Experienced board members know that most ideas in a boardroom need at least 2 board members behind it to gain some traction. And that's just one example of the importance of the board working as a team. In contrast to our role as operational leaders, in a boardroom, everyone is a peer, bringing his or her respective expertise onto the playing field. Think about a high-performing sports team. Each team member has his or her own individual strengths, but reflects and respects the skills of the other players and constantly works to help others perform at their highest levels. Typically, it's easiest for a new board member early on to stay within her own comfort zone. And by that, I mean her area of expertise. As time goes on, she earns credibility and is able to contribute more broadly. Surprisingly, the concept of the board as a team is not widely discussed or even accepted, but shifting to a team culture can make all the difference in making board service not only more effective, but more enjoyable.
So seeing the board as a team is a really important tenet of all of our leading edge stewardship work. And in fact, the way we see it is the board is a team, and then it's engaging with another team, that's the management team. And best practice is when they're really working well together, of course. Great boards make great management teams better, and the best CEOs and management teams draw the best from their boards. But it's not always easy to get this kind of relationship. So effective boards develop norms of engagement with the management team that are grounded in trust again, and a clear understanding of what the role is for each one of these teams. For the board, that role involves both support and also challenge. Strong boards provide a very healthy balance between the two. Again, not easy to come to, but very important to keep in mind. This concept is absolutely key to the relationship. Now, I want to tell you a little story that goes with it. In my view, this applies, the business of support and challenge really applies to both individuals as well as the board as a team. So my story is about a fellow that I was once on a board with who was chair of a committee who was very focused on protecting the board as opposed to advancing the mission of the company. And in his committee, he would bring up topics that the management team was not asked to prepare for. He'd grill them. He'd make them feel like he was catching them out. The executives hated to come before him. They hated to go to that committee. And as you can imagine, neither he nor the committee were successful. So what he failed to do was find the right balance between support and challenge. He was all challenge, no support. It just won't work. You can't have credibility and trust unless you find that really nice line. And that means, providing support in lots of ways, reinforcing a point that management has made, or giving them a compliment when they've done something well, making it clear that the board has their back. These are all ways of helping to get that balance right, because you do have to challenge. And if you haven't built up the support, it's not going to feel right or be well received when, in fact, you bring an effective challenge.
Thank you, Mary. We're moving on now to candid conversations. So candid conversations can be critical when times get tough. In these moments, the board and management often have to address the good, the bad, and the ugly. We elaborate on this in the roadmap piece, but for now, let's just say that this is when you cash in all the chips you've got because you invested the time and effort to develop trusted relationships. They make all the difference.
I want to say a few things in conclusion. First, in this video, we've only scratched the surface of our thoughts about what it takes to be an outstanding board member. And we just want to remind you again, please, grab the handbook, really look at it. There's some great questions at the end to kind of work through as though it's a workbook, and then pick it up again 6 months and pick it up again 6 months after that. Second, practice your skills with each other. So Linda, Carol, and I talk all the time about sticky situations that we run into. We have to be careful to preserve confidentiality, but we can often really learn by talking through the situations where we want to be subtle, where we want to be super skillful, where we want to apply the tenets that we've talked about, but we really want somebody to talk it through with. And if you develop a buddy friend like that, it can be a career-long friendship, which I think is really valuable. The third thing I want to say is, boards lead, right? Our culture kind of focuses on that CEO hero, and they're hugely important in leading an organization, but in a great organization, there is a strong board behind it, right? And so being on a board is about leading too. And we really feel strongly that leadership as a board member begins with leadership of yourself, right? You own your own behavior and you need to bring it, particularly if you want to gain influence over time. What we find is that when directors are frustrated about their influence, it usually arises in part from their own actions. And this is a role where you don't get much feedback if you don't ask for it. So if you are struggling, it's good to ask for some feedback from the lead director, from a committee chair. Take that to heart. If you need guidance, come to one of your fellow members on Stanford Women on Boards. Use the roadmap. And finally, we just want to say that we really believe that every organization deserves a strong board. And that means a board filled with people who are focused on improving their own contributions and behavior and improving the performance of the board as a whole. So we hope you'll join us in that challenge.